The Democratic Services Committee, and nice to see everybody, even though I can't see anything other than the agenda right now, but we'll move on. First item is to note the appointment of myself as chair, and thank you for that, everybody who voted for me in the last but one council meeting. And the next item on the agenda is to appoint a vice chair. So do we have any nominations for vice chair, please, amongst the members?
Chair Sue McConnell has her hand up.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I didn't. Right. So, Councillor McConnell.
I propose Peter Strong as vice chair.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a seconder to that?
Councillor Sandals, I second.
Thank you. Is there any other nomination? Presumably not. In that case, then, Councillor Strong, congratulations on your election to the vice chair of this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need to show vote now to show our approval? So there's a vote to come up. So, right, shall we vote then? Everybody in favour of Councillor Strong as vice chair, could you please vote and submit your vote, please? Right. With a unanimous, we'll go back to where we were then. I'll congratulate Councillor Strong again on your appointment to the vice chair of this committee, Councillor Strong. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you twice. Yes. Right. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which are apologies for absence. I have an apology from Councillor Howells, who is not able to attend this afternoon. Are there any other apologies?
Yes, Chair. Also, Councillor Maria Stevens.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from amongst members?
Chair, Councillor Thomas Davis. My name's Councillor Alistair Neil, and I'm standing in for Councillor Davis.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Neil. And Councillor Jones, did you have a wish to speak as well?
Yes, Councillor Faye Broomfield said she'd sent her apologies, but I don't think she's on this committee, so I haven't got the list in front of me. No, that's fine. You can. I'll just let her know that it wasn't necessary. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And if there's no other apology, we'll move on to declarations of interest. Well, Matt, I'm sure, will advise us on this. And as we are a Democratic Services Committee in the pursuit of making conditions work better for councillors, I suppose we'd all have to declare an interest, would we, Matt? Or no, right. So anybody who feels that they need to declare an interest? Okay, excellent. We'll move on then to the next item, which is induction feedback. And we shall go over to you, Matt, for induction feedback before we open the discussion.
Chair, thank you very much. Members, good afternoon. I'm Matt Phillips. I'm Chief Officer for People and Governance, which includes both the statutory monetary officer role and also statutory head of democratic services role. In terms of apologies, Chair, John Pearson sends his apologies. As the democratic services manager, he would normally attend Democratic Services Committee, and indeed he would have led on this discussion. So forgive me, you have me as a substitute. Unfortunately, he's had a clash with a medical appointment he's had to attend this afternoon. So very simply, as the first Democratic Services Committee meeting following the election and the last 8 weeks, I think it is, of induction, we're always very keen to learn what we can as contemporaneously as we can in terms of how the induction process has been. 5th, 6th of May seems like a very, very long time ago already, doesn't it? And it's an incredible learning curve that councillors have been through. So anything that we can take now in terms of representations from Democratic Services Committee members would be incredibly useful for us in formulating how it works next time. I think in terms of my reflections on it, when you have a fairly significant turnover of councillors, as we've seen, I think, you know, with something like 60% new councillors, and especially when you factor in that, you know, with Labour as the largest group, I think 18 out of the 22 councillors are new, and therefore with a new administration as well, that's a significant gear change for an authority to go through, and one that the induction process needs to somehow be able to adapt to and stand up to. So we have tried where possible to amend how we've worked, but I imagine that there's probably some lessons learned which is much better heard from members. So effectively, Chair, it's over to you in the committee, and we are all ears.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And may I record on behalf of the committee the thanks probably of all councillors for everything that's been put forward to help councillors either refit into their role or to fit into their new role. So I'm sure we're all very grateful for that. And right, members, should we start off with members of the committee first, and then we'll open it out to other members who have joined us for this afternoon's meeting. Not sure if the hand function is working yet, or it's not on my computer, but right, Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I think, you know, just to make the overall point, if I may, which is that in my view, it's been a really excellent induction process, and I pass on thanks to the hard work of everybody involved to make it so. I know it's also quite disruptive for officers, senior officers, to be working through this period, but it's felt very much like every effort's been made to help us land effectively and as quickly as possible. So it's an overall thought. If I may, just a couple of constructive points. It has been quite significantly officers talking to councillors new or old, and actually a fair amount of the commentary has been planting seeds of terror rather than seeds of expectation of what can be done. You know, there's a balance to be struck by being aware of risks and so on. But I felt that it might benefit from having more examples of what councils and councillors have been able to get done in previous years. Examples, and quite specific examples, I think could be quite helpful for people to say this is the kind of thing that, you know, you can achieve. We've talked about how many you know, how you need to read the reports thoroughly, how you need to be aware of standing orders, how you need to be conscious of codes of conduct and all the matters around security and data security. I think that's a gap that might well be worth looking at. And in that regard, and finally, it might be actually quite useful to ask some of the more experienced councillors in a non-partisan way to get involved in that. In other words, to draw on the experience of councillors who have got experience of being in the council. I know I've benefited from, within our group, from listening to some of the experienced councillors that there are in the group, and I thank them for that. It's possibly something that could be done on a more planned way. So just 2 or 3 constructive thoughts, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and it's also nice to hear the word experienced members rather than possibly old members. I'm getting very sensitive. I have a birthday coming up. Right, thank you, Councillor Neil. Appreciate the comments. And are there any other comments from members of the committee? I can't see any hands up. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jones.
Yes, I agree. I actually had that down as one of the possibilities and one of the suggestions that experience, sorry, I was going to say old, David, experienced members should perhaps help with that induction process through being able to a Q&A and also giving examples, as you say, Alistair, of what has gone on before. I did note that, you know, it happens every time, and we were all guilty of it. We come in and we ask questions which seem very basic, some of them, but they've already been dealt with, and that isn't known about. You know, it could be about any particular subject, but I think if we get people, the new members, up to date as soon as possible, that will help us go forward quickly. So please, yes, in future, could you use those members who want to do it, who want to be involved, let them become involved.
Certainly, good point. Thank you. Any other member? Matt? Sorry, your hand's up. So,
if that's okay, Chair, just to say, I mean, that's, you don't know what you don't know, don't you? And hearing that perspective is immediately enlightening. I've written down kind of governance heavy and aspiration optimism light, because that's how us technocrats can think sometimes. So that's incredibly useful. So I really appreciate it. And just to say that if other things fall out, if there are other ideas that others have or are represented through groups, then please, you know, email me or John, and we will pick them up and feed them into a broader piece of work. Thank you.
okay, thank you. There's a member in the chamber, Councillor Strong.
Hi, thank you. One thing that struck me during the training and induction meetings, I was a co-opted member of the Children and Young Persons Committee for several years. I hadn't been given that same sort of training when I joined, and I think it would be really, really useful if co-opted members had the relevant sessions. Now that they've been recorded, they could be used in that way. I certainly would have been a much more effective member of the Children and Young Persons Committee as a co-opted member had I known then what I know now.
Okay, thank you. Right, the hands up function is working on my computer now, so we'll move on to Councillor Powell and Maureen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Back in 2008, when I was first elected, we didn't have anything like this because there weren't that many new members, I suppose, compared with today. But we didn't, except for the specified planning training, I don't remember us having anything like we've had now. And I want to congratulate Matt and all the other people concerned on producing such a good introduction to all the new members. And I do hope that they appreciate it, because we just sort of muddled in and learnt from the experienced members in those days. And as I said, except for when you had specified training for the planning committee. So I must congratulate the county council on putting it forward like this for all the new members. And I do hope that if they want, you know, if we can be of any help to them as experienced members, that they ask us. Because we'll always be willing to say anything. But actually, I have learned quite a few things on these training days, that even after all the years I've been here. So you're never too late to learn. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen. Just an observation that it might be helpful as well to know who the target might be. And as Maureen has just said, that we're always learning new things, but if it could be said who they were targeted towards, whether they were targeted just for new members or a mixture, that might be helpful as well for the older experienced members, right? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to give Councillor Strong a compliment, because I thought that he was an effective member as a co-opted member of CYP anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. Right, any other hands up? Right. Right, okay, we take your point, Councillor Howells, about travelling down to Cornwall and can't actively take part, but we appreciate that you're there in spirit, if not in person. Thank you. Any other comments to be made now then? Right, it appears that we can move on with those comments that Matt has recorded, and we'll move on to the next item, which is item 6, the timing of council meetings. There's a report attached concerning this subject in the agenda pack, and I'm sure we've all had a chance to read it. And Matt, do you want to start, or let the discussion flow?
Well, Chair, hopefully the report is kind of self-explanatory. That this is not just a discussion that council will benefit from Democratic Services Committee's recommendation because there is a legal requirement to do it, but because with that sizable turnover of councillors, a very different makeup, and it is a question that's come to me from a number of avenues, not least the leader, kind of on behalf of the new cabinet, to just have this discussion. So the report is not designed to bind or lead or anything else. It's as an open as discussion as possible, but the final outcome being something that Democratic Services Committee can recommend into council will be incredibly useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's have members of the committee's view first then. Any comments? Councillor Strong.
Yes, can I suggest we deal with what I hope will be the easiest part of this first, and that is the recommendation that committees choose their own meeting times, and then we can move on to what I think will be a more complex issue of the times of the full council.
Yeah, that's fine. Are we happy as a committee to let individual committees alter the timing as it suits the members of that individual committee? Are we happy to do that, first of all? Are the hands up relating to the general discussion or the item that Councillor Strong just mentioned?
Councillor Strong.
Yeah, right. So shall we add a vote for that? Nicola's asking. Yes, let's have a quick vote on that then. Shall we? Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I just wondered, I think it's okay to, I mean, obviously in the council diary, we sort of have, you know, the meetings sort of set down so that, you know, we can arrange our lives around it in a sense,
yes.
You know, so we don't book our own individual things according to our own circumstances. And I was just wondering if committees did decide on a different time from the time that was set down in the diary. I mean, is it possible for them to actually agree a schedule of meetings? Because I do try to attend meetings as much as I can, and the difficulty is if meetings are chopped and changed from meeting to meeting, as opposed to the time being changed, then, you know, you may well miss a meeting just because you're going on
what's in the diary,
holiday or something like that. And, you know, I try to arrange what I do around my council diary. And I just thought that if you have it so flexible that every single meeting can be changed, I mean, it's not just the start time, it's also the date time as well, isn't it? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, potentially yes, but I'm interpreting more so the time of the meeting rather than their own start time rather than necessarily the day that it takes place. So if it was scheduled at 10 o'clock, for example, and the majority would prefer to do it at 2 o'clock, then I think that was the essence of this suggestion, really. So,
can I come back briefly on that? I mean, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes, yeah.
I would agree with what Councillor Brown says, and I would anticipate that the default position would be for committees to stick with the dates that have already been scheduled. Only if there are significant reasons to need to change them, that they would be changed. Yeah, so I hope committees will do that. But in the end, you know, we do need to leave it to them, and I would very much agree with the need for a schedule of meetings, hopefully covering the whole year.
Okay, so no further hands up as far as I can see. Are we happy to approve or otherwise the start time of committees and leave that to the individual committee then, in line with Councillor Strong's suggestion?
Could we add, Chair, that about not just approving that committees set their own start time, but I think what Councillor Strong has suggested is actually an add-on to that, to say determine a schedule of meetings. I mean, I know there needs to be some flexibility, but it just helps to give people a rough idea when they are. Thank you.
Right, there's a hand up in the chamber. Sorry, yes, please.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether this is, I mean, it seems to me pragmatic that and easier to organise if individual committees decide what time suits them the best. But I do think this is quite complicated in principle, and it's absolutely the core of Matt was talking earlier on about the WLGA diversity in democracy work that's going ahead. We are a very different council than we were. We would like to be even more different than we are, but at the moment, the council will inevitably and should embrace people with a whole range of different commitments and circumstances. And if we can't do that, we're not being diverse. So I'm thinking that this work probably, pragmatically, we need to decide when we're meeting. We need to make the meetings up until August. We need to pragmatically decide when committees are meeting. But I think there's a bit of work, possibly for this committee, to look at how these things are arranged and when they're arranged.
Okay, thank you. Right. Are we in a position then, I'm just asking now, to vote on or otherwise the suggestion from Councillor Strong? Which is the third recommendation on the from the report. Councillor Joe.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Could I just come in quickly? There is an issue here of I don't know how we do it, chicken or the egg, because there is an inexperience here of everybody who's attending meetings as to how complicated, how complex, how they can go on. It all seems fairly straightforward now. The issue I've got really is that we've all got diaries issued to us for the coming year, and they've all got printed in them the actual dates. So I'm quite happy to say all timings are, accommodated by the chair, but not the dates at this stage. In future, we can address how we do that, but we can't do it now. But for a start, it's a waste of paper, it's a waste of officer time and everything to undo the diary at this stage. So I think it's quite important that we stick to the dates, but the timings can be changed accordingly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's, am I being stupid here, or to approve that committees set their own start time? I mean, start time for the day upon which the meeting has been set is how I'm interpreting it, but there seems to be a difference of opinion.
Can I raise my hand? Yeah, sorry, I'd assumed it would include date, but I come back to the point that, and again, we should perhaps find a way of emphasising this, that the default position should be to stick to the date that's in the diary. But if we had examples where those dates were extremely inconvenient for the great majority of a committee, then it would only make sense to change it. So I'm hoping there's no real disagreement here. But if we can find a way of emphasising that point to the committees, people have very crowded diaries, and mucking about with them creates all sorts of problems. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Neil.
Yeah, I think it's just to support what Councillor Jones just said for the avoidance of doubt, Chair. It's certainly something, I think, that the date is not only a matter for councillors, it's also important for officers so that they've got matters scheduled, and it's important for members of the public. So what's already been scheduled, what's already been published, in principle, it's a good idea not to mess around with it. To stick as much as possible with what we've already got. The committees have a natural ability to be able to determine through the chair, vice chair, and its members if there is a meeting upcoming that is distinctly difficult for the largest number of people on the committee. That would be perfectly normal for members of the committee to approach the chair around that. and that's not something that we would need to, in my view, make any special provision for. So I absolutely would support the view that this is about setting the start time, not about changing dates.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think Councillor Strong and Councillor Neil have made the relevant points about, you know, trying to stick to the date, really.
Okay, right. I seem to be coming back around the bush again. Are we in a position to vote for or against the suggestion to approve the committee set their own start time? Then let's. Right, are we happy to vote then? Let's vote. Okay, can you submit your vote then, please? Okay, right. Well, it would seem that there's 100% in favour of that. So thank you for that. And so the third recommendation of that is down to the individual committees has been supported then. And then the other two recommendations, that the Democratic Services Committee agree a set of options on the timing of future meetings, future council meetings rather, and that these options are put forward to the next full council meeting for debate and to agree the most suitable option for future meetings. Right, comments from members of the Democratic Services Committee first of all then. Councillor Brown.
Oh yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, we did actually try and alter the timing of the county council meeting, and we did have a trial of having it at 10 o'clock, I think, rather than 2 o'clock. But everybody found that the 2 o'clock start time was actually worked out better for everybody. And I think the difficulty with the county council meeting is that often it can be a very long meeting, so that you know, if you start at 2, you may not finish until about 7 o'clock at night. And I think the thing is that if you're going to have a county council meeting, I would not do by Teams, because I can't stand actually looking at the screen for 5 hours on the trot. With my camera on as well. So I would always come into the chamber for a county council meeting for that reason. But also I do feel that if you start it later on, then people are in the evening it does get much more tiring than if in the daytime. Sort of if you started a meeting at 5 and it went on for I don't know, 5 hours, you wouldn't be finishing till 10, which is I think is far too late in the meeting. And you'd run into the danger of rushing items just because people were feeling quite fatigued at that particular time. So I personally believe that the county council meetings would be better to remain at the 2 o'clock start period, because obviously there's breaks as you go along, and they can be very long meetings as well. So for that reason I would very much support keeping it the same. There are obviously other reasons with regard to if you do change other meetings, then you have got the difficulty of it impinging on officer time, because it's not just I think we've got to consider officers as well, because it's not just the convenience of the members, it's also how the officers operate, because if they're taking evening meetings, they may have their own commitments in the evening, and also you may find that if they're taking time in lieu, that you can't get hold of them in the day on particular issues that you want to discuss. So I think for various reasons, I think it's better to stick to a 2 o'clock start, because we have tried another time and it just hasn't worked. And the other thing about evening meetings is, I mean, I have evening meetings. I'm a trustee of a charity. I also have 2 community council evening meetings as well. And, you know, there are things going on in the evenings that you get involved as a county councillor as well. So I've probably had more of my say than I possibly should have done. But I mean, that's the way I would propose it to go forward. I don't know about, I mean, we've said committees. I don't know about cabinet or anything else. I mean, does committees include cabinet, or is cabinet the cabinet members' decision? So it would be helpful to have some clarity on that. Thank you.
Right. Okay, Matt, could you help us there, because it does say council meetings, and whether that's full council meetings or just meetings that are part of council work.
So for clarity, cabinet is the preservative leader and the cabinet. So it is for them to determine how and when they hold their meetings. And because you've already voted on the other committees of council element to delegate that to them to determine, you are effectively now discussing the timing of full council.
Full council meetings, yeah, right. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I noticed Councillor Neil's hand next.
Thank you, Chair. To endorse really also what Councillor Brown has said, I think there's some very good points made. I noted down at the end of our full council meeting last week what the chair said, the chair of the council said at the very end, and I wrote down her words because I thought they were quite relevant to this discussion that we're having today. What the chair said was at the end of the meeting, it's 10 to 6. People have families to see and things to do. And I think it was a very clear, almost instinctive recognition that that's the reality. It's the reality of life for probably most people in the council, things to do or families to see. And both of those things are really important. I think it would be a very retrograde step if we were to find ourselves in a situation where we were actually minimising the amount of time that members of the council were spending with their families, with their children, with older members of their family, and various other aspects that family life requires. And that applies also to officers. I think that's very important. I've possibly got the fairly unique experience, if not the T-shirts from the experience of having been chief executive of 3 different councils over most of the last 2 decades in England and in Wales. And interestingly enough, they've had council meetings in one of those in the morning, another in the afternoon, and another in the evening. And I have to say that far and away the most effective timing were those that started in the morning at 10 o'clock or 10:30 with appropriate breaks, as Councillor Brown's referenced. It meant that people weren't feeling rushed. It meant that people's concentration was at its peak, and there are very important decisions that are made at council meetings. There were some very important decisions and recommendations, for example, made last week, and it would be, I think, retrograde were that not to be the case that meetings were held in, as it were, daytime. I completely understand 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That would seem to fit with the focus that people can bring to bear. My own experience has been that 10 o'clock has probably been the most effective. It's just to make, if I may, the point too that where there were evening scheduled council meetings, it was very marked that over a longer period of time, attendance falls off, and the attendance of the public to those meetings became scanter and scanter, and very often they would stay for, if they arrived at all, they would stay for a very short time at the start and then leave. And something that really I found very troublesome was officers started to leave. I'm sure professional officers will not take a view of preference one way or the other, and they'll want to say, well, you know, what the councillors believe is the right thing to do, they'll follow. My experience in one of those councils was that within 12 months of the commencement of evening council meetings, 4 out of 6 directors had left and 3 assistant directors had left. And the amount of knowledge that left with them, the amount of disruption to the council, to its effective services and delivery of services was enormous. And it was really, you know, I wouldn't like to say for every one of those individuals, the only thing that counted was this, but it was certainly a significant factor. It took significant time out of their lives for council and indeed in that case, evening meetings of cabinet. And I think we need to be very mindful of that. Mindful too that there are officers in this meeting, but I would put forward the view that we've got good officers, we've got people who are effective in their roles, and we should also work in such ways that makes them as effective as possible too. Just the last point, if I may, Chair, concentration levels drop off in later meetings as attendance does, in my experience. In fact, the later the meeting, the more often I discovered, and I had the benefit of being able to look out at councillors, as is the case in our chamber too. Quite a lot of them were not awake. They may have been in attendance, but they weren't not necessarily entirely awake for large swathes of the meeting as the meeting grew later. And it's just to recognise that is the case. The later the meeting, the less likely people are to be fully focused, to be able to concentrate, and indeed to be able to stay awake for larger periods of time. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The next hand I noticed was Councillor Keir, and before I ask you to speak, Councillor Keir, I noticed there is an order of hands up, but it didn't seem to work for the first few hands that went up. And right, okay then. So Councillor Keir.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillors Brown and Neil, who, as ever, when you follow people, they've already highlighted some of the points that you wanted to raise. On a personal basis, I have to balance a part-time job and my own business, so notifications, first of all, of meetings in advance and the timings is absolutely vital for me to fix everything in. So I think there were suggestions about moving times, whether it's already been trialled before with regards to summer and winter, etc. So that would prove a difficulty for me. I took the time to speak to previous councillors who are no longer part of this council as well, and to say what their experience has been. And certainly there has been talk of meetings that have gone on, even starting at 2 o'clock, well into the evening session. When I've chaired groups in a voluntary capacity, I've always been cognizant of meeting times, and it is absolutely true, as Councillor Neil says, is that towards the end of the meeting there is a sense of people wanting to, let's say, shuffling papers or shuffling their feet, wanting to leave, and I think it's fair that council agenda items are not ordered in terms of importance, and we may therefore have very important business towards the end of a meeting that deserves the absolute attention as item 1 potentially may be. And given that we are such a large group, 46, it's always difficult obviously to get all the representations on everybody, but we should be encouraging participation from everyone, and therefore I don't think that the prospect of, shall we say, time circumvented meetings, it would be right, not that it's proposed, but I think if you were to be starting later in the day, as you're getting past, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, etc., people are starting to think, I really need to get home here, and there may well be, therefore, inadvertently, that people may be not encouraged or enthusiastic to speak. Well, perhaps they might have done had they have, because it's towards the end of the day or end of the evening and wanting to get home, as opposed to actually actively participating and representing the views of their constituents, but also their own personal views as well. So personally, I would not be in favour of evening meetings. I think it does interfere also with voluntary meetings that I personally involved in. I'm sure other councillors are as well. And certainly afternoon meetings to me would be good. It allows me to plan and run my own business in the morning, and I certainly would favour the 2 o'clock. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next hand up on the list is Councillor Jones. Sorry, Councillor Powell, you're waving at me. It's nice to see you.
I didn't think you'd seen the list down the side. That was all.
I have
got it now.
Yes,
You've got it
yes,
now.
yes.
Well done. Yeah.
Right. And it did have it up throughout the meeting. It's just purely that not every hand came up in the order that, well, the list didn't appear until some people had put their hand up before. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's really that we must ensure a work-life balance, isn't it, and meet the needs of the majority of the members, and not just think of the young or the old, or those who work or those who don't. We've got to think of everybody, and most of us, or a lot of people, have got hidden duties as well. So it's something that we've really got to be mindful of. But I have been present at meetings that have gone on till 10 o'clock, and the embarrassment when there's literally a mass exodus from the chamber and you get fewer and fewer people there, and it really does not work. So although I hope meetings wouldn't go on that late, I really feel that evening meetings are not conducive to a democratic process, to be honest. Not unless everybody's whipped in for the whole time. The other thing is, I don't think we should forget, is that employers have a duty to release their employees if they're a councillor for a full council. And therefore, it really shouldn't encroach on work too much. And for instance, if we have an afternoon meeting, at least that person can be in work for a morning, perhaps work extra hours, perhaps go in early, whatever. If they're a teacher, that's hard. But I've been part of this process, and I do know that employers have a duty to release people. The other thing I just wanted to say that, yes, alertness, concentration levels do go down, and we do see people nod off. Not always the best thing to show the public, when they're looking in, but perfectly natural when people have been working all day and then have to attend an evening meeting. I do know that the Conservative group as a whole would prefer a 2 o'clock meeting, if not a morning meeting, and that the evening meeting they feel is, as I say, not a process that's really democratic in its outlook and its achievements. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of the things that I was going to say have been said too, but possibly not in the same way. I agree wholeheartedly with 2 o'clock, I think, has always worked the best. Trouble is with evenings, not only have we got other commitments like town council, community council, governors' meetings, and other outside bodies that people have to go to, but you've got to think about particularly the people with families. They can manage childminding during the daytime is probably much easier to do. But I think that the younger parents should be with their children when it's time to go to bed. And if they're going to have evening meetings, they're going to lose out on that. And their children are going to lose out on a very special time of the day. So I think this is important. And I'm now going to be a bit controversial, I expect, and possibly I might offend some people. But when you go for a job, you look at what the job entails, you look at what hours they're going to be, and you look what you're going to do. And when you stand for county council or town council or community council, you should look to see how the council works. And if you think, well, I'm not going to go unless I have meetings in the evening because I want to have my day to do something else, you can't go in there and change it like that. I think you've got to look at it all and say, if I'm going to be a county councillor, I've got to be prepared to give up part of my time during the day to do my duties. And I think 2 o'clock is most sensible for full council. I wouldn't mind if it was 10 o'clock, but I think 2 o'clock seems to have suited over the years. And when we've had votes over the last good many years, it's always voted for 2 o'clock anyway. But I do feel that evening meetings are detrimental and would be detrimental. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Sandals.
Thank you. Some really interesting points from everybody there, and it's sort of brought it into focus. What I think is important is that we're a brand new administration, and I think people should have choices. So whether it's via a survey, and the survey needs to be really well worded so that people get a choice of times that are good for them and times that are bad. And I'm sure possibly in the end it'll come out as perhaps an afternoon meeting. But I think it's really important that we all get a choice. And my second point, is there any way that speeches, presentations can be limited? Because I noted in that my first, full council meeting last week, some people spoke for a very, very long time when I think it could have been condensed into a lot fewer words. My experience is via national union conferences where our times are limited, and we have the proposer of a motion starts off with 4 minutes and then the seconder gets 3, and any support or against get 3 minutes as well. There's a light. I mean, it's a simple piece of software, and if that could be brought in, I think, and that's just something I've just thought of now, but I think that would be a really good way forward. We should all be able to focus what we've got to say. If you can't say it within a few minutes, then really we need to learn how to do it. I hope that's not controversial, but that's the way that I feel about it. And I still think that I think we need a choice as a new administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandals. It's making a case for an evening meeting there if everybody speaks for no more than 3 minutes, I think. But right, we'll move on to Councillor Wright then.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sandals, there are already limits in the standing orders, and I promise you I did stick to them. They may feel long, but they are there. As a general rule, contribution is limited to 10 minutes. Sometimes it's different, but that is in the the massive constitution we were given. It's in there. What I was going to say, I think it's Councillor Neil raised the point of staff leaving their jobs when meetings change to the evening, and I can understand that, and I think it is a massive risk, and I think it's a big ask to effectively change someone's terms of employment without consultation or without really making people part of that. And I know that if I had a job where I'd been expecting to work a standard working hours, and then there suddenly was a 10 o'clock finish, I would leave, and I don't think that that's an unreasonable approach to take. So, yeah, thank you. Councillors raised concerns about evenings. I mostly share them.
Okay, thank you. Have I missed anybody's hand or any... sorry, Councillor Dimmock, you did have your hand up before, so... Oh, sorry, there's a note on this. He has to leave for another meeting. So, right, is there any other councillor that wishes to speak before we...
Can I? My hand is on the list.
Sorry, it's not on mine, but that's why I'm asking Councillor Strong. By all means, speak on.
I've got the wrong list, obviously. If I can just quickly make the point, I think the problem with the point that Councillor Powell makes about seeing what the job involves is of course the council job only pays a part-time salary. And therefore, unless you're retired or running your own business in a way where you can make your hours flexible and so on, that is a significant problem for people in full-time work. I think in the long run, councils, and this probably will need to be done at an All Wales level, will need to look at the entire way in which they conduct their business if we're going to achieve the sort of aim that Councillor McConnell alluded to of being much more diverse. I'm not sure there is any way around it in terms of when councils meet. Even if you said, well, let's accommodate full-time workers. Well, not all full-time workers work 9 till 5. Lots of people work shifts and strange hours nowadays. But I think keeping the meetings at 2 o'clock, at least for the time being, is a perfectly acceptable approach to take, but that we should explore any ways that we can to make the running of a council more favourable to any sectors of the population who might consider becoming councillors in the future. And in a way, we need to do that during this term to prepare for the next term.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Do you wish to come back, Councillor Neil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was really just to add to the points made that I don't think we've made this particular note, which is that the one thing that really has changed in recent years is the ability to be able to use what we're doing right now to connect with meetings from outside of the chamber. It reduces the amount of travel time. It reduces the amount of interruption time for members of the council to be able to get to a meeting if they're unable to get to a meeting. The ability to be able to join a meeting from potentially their place of work or nearby has suddenly become, well, for many people, almost the norm. And it's certainly changed, I think, the ability of many councillors to be able to access and attend meetings during the day when they may otherwise have had a significant interruption due to just the travel to and from the chamber. And I say that whilst at the same time agreeing with Councillor Powell, and I think other councillors have mentioned that it is better if we are able to meet as a full council in the chamber. But it might have been Councillor Brown who mentioned that. But the addition of Teams really has changed the landscape, I think, of attendance, and it's great for diversity. I believe that it's done so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not aware that we have any other person waiting to make a contribution. If my interpretation is correct, it doesn't seem to be too much in the way of support for an evening meeting, and it appears that more people are in favour of the afternoon session with some openness towards a morning start. Do you wish to vote on this, or do you wish to delay a decision by introducing a survey, as Councillor Sandals suggested? And there may also be, as I suggested in the pre-meeting, some sense in delaying a decision for people to see how timing goes and suits them in terms of attendance at meetings. But I'm not making my thoughts a proposition in any way. How do we wish to proceed then, councillors, without going round the bush again? Councillor Keir.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. The other point I wanted to add, you'd mentioned a 60% turnover in councillors here. We are therefore, we've had one full meeting. We're very, very early on into the 5-year term here, and I just think it's very difficult after one meeting in which the chair, as Councillor Neil pointed out, said, look, it is 10 to 6. We've got other things to do and families to go to. I just think it's too early to assess the impact on all of the councillors to be making recommendations at this particular point. My own view is that we should stick to 2 p.m. and let's see how it works out for all of us. I just think it's too early on in the length of a council to be making changes, is the point I wanted to make.
Okay, fine, thank you. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. It was just really to emphasise this point that I don't think that this kind of decision can be reached by survey without experience. And I don't mean any disrespect to any colleague who may be new to the council in that regard. It's just the simple fact of life that how do you know until you've actually got the experience of a number of meetings? And I really think Councillor Keir's nailed that point very well, which is that there's a long time ahead, and rushing into something without the experience of necessarily for new councillors being able to say how this can work, it seems to me would be the wrong thing to do. It has seemed to me from the discussion that we've been having today that there is a general view that evening meetings are not recommended to be put forward. My view would be, my recommendation would be that from the committee chair, with respect, we might want to take back the recommendation that to leave things as they are, as the general views expressed in the last hour or so seem to be or 30-40 minutes seem to be supporting the view that afternoon meetings are preferred, and to potentially review this in a year's time when all councillors will have the benefit of the experience of 1 year of meetings, at which point it may well be a very sensible thing to have a survey or other approaches that be taken, but that might be an appropriate recommendation rather than just sitting on the fence.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Neil. Now then, Councillor Brown.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I think Councillor Neil has made a sensible recommendation. I mean, I did notice at the last county council meeting, there did seem to be a, although we are, you know, new administration and there are a considerable proportion of new councillors, we did seem to have a good attendance record for that particular meeting, which was at 2 o'clock. So I think that would support it. And then basically the idea of waiting to see how we go and how people experience it seems a sensible suggestion at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strong?
Yes, I was going to make more or less the same recommendation. I just had the so meet at 2 o'clock for the next year, review it then when councillors will be given opportunity to take part in a survey or some other way to express their views. Just to add the proviso that I would assume that the executive will be continuing to explore this issue of how to make the council more diverse in future, and might well bringing some work on that back to us as a committee. But the recommendation, I would go very much with what Councillor Neil said.
Okay, Councillor Sandals?
Yes, thank you. Only briefly, I note that there are 2, 4, 6, 7. There are 8 councils out of the Welsh councils that actually start after 2 o'clock. So it might be worthwhile finding out how they manage as well. How they've come to that time. Because we've got the list in the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Watts. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can only apologise. I just spent an interesting 3/4 of an hour on the phone with Callum from SRS trying to rework my password, so it's kind of frustrating. I mean, I take into account and entirely respect the opinions of everybody in the committee, and I would have naturally historically been all in favour of afternoon meetings, morning meetings, because I'm self-employed and I've got that flexibility. And possibly there's somebody to look after the kids, or the kids can walk home on their own now in the nice weather. But I think if you're a single parent, or if you're a carer, or any of those kind of other things, I think that daytime is not that brilliant, really. So I guess, you know, my view is I think we should take into account everybody, and that, you know, we move away from this, you know, retired, semi-retired situation where you get a lot of older people on here of a certain demographic who can just be more flexible, and that's fine. But I think if we're going to be serious about kind of embracing then younger people, single parents, people with caring responsibilities, people who want to do the school run, I think we have to be a little bit more flexible. And I'm someone that quite likes the status quo, I assure you. You know, it's kind of very convenient for me, but you've got to look beyond myself for the health of this and well-being of this local authority going forward. If we're really serious about changing the demographic and, you know, looking at things from a different perspective, I think we've got to be at the very least, a little bit more experimental in the timings of the meetings. And that doesn't help me. I'm going to be honest with you. You know, I'd be quite sufficiently happy to, you know, sat here with a cup of tea at home whilst caring for my mum or whatever it is, or going to work and working it around me. But it isn't just about me, is it? It's about making sure that people feel enfranchised, and that includes, you know, we've just mentioned, or we there was a big play, you know, we have parity between men and women on this local authority. We've all got responsibilities, so I think we just need to shift it up a gear, really. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Keir?
So I just wanted to add on to that. Surely, should we not be looking at this on the makeup of the current council, and not setting something in tablets of stone for the future? We need to be looking at the effectiveness of this council, And therefore, I think what Councillor Neil's suggesting in terms of let's see how it runs and then let's survey it, let's get some experience. That's absolutely the right way. I don't think setting something absolutely rigid at this stage is the right thing to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, my gut feeling is that we haven't necessarily had enough time to for everybody to gauge their perfect timing amongst the for council meetings, and I'd be very happy to delay any decision until people have had that opportunity to assess things. And we've had a suggestion from Councillor Neil that's been supported, that we leave things for possibly a year, was it, Councillor Neil, to and then come back and revisit the issue, because there's as many good cases for the afternoon as there are for the morning, and not the evening possibly. Am I right in assessing the mood of the meeting that we are happy to delay things for 12 months? Thank you, Nicola. You've put to recommend a start time of 2 o'clock for meetings of full council and to review for 12 months. Are we happy to vote on that now, please? Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Watts and Councillor Keir now wants to speak. Or are the hands historic?
No, they're legacy hands, Chair, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Historic, legacy, right. Lovely word, thank you. Right, okay. I'm not aware that there's any other hands up. Are we happy to vote then, please? Right, has everybody voted? Well, it would appear that that is our decision, that we're happy to delay the, for start times to continue at 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. and for full council, and to review this in 12 months' time. Okay, thank you. That's, I think, a good decision to come to. Moving back to the agenda, sorry, as he flicks back down through the pages. Next one, public participation strategy. Matt, I appreciate you have to go. You need to go in a short period of time, but hopefully you'll have enough time to tell us about the next 2 items on the agenda.
Thanks, Chair. So 2 apologies to start with then. First of all, yes, I'm afraid I do have to go in 25 minutes because there's a Gold Command meeting relating to the fuel protests that are planned for next week. So sorry, councillors. And secondly, that there's no report with this. It's something that has evolved really over the last couple of weeks as part of the kind of portfolio discussions with Cabinet. So the public participation strategy. This is I mentioned earlier the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, which is a fairly major piece of legislation that the Welsh Government introduced last year. And as of last month, one of the elements of the legislation which has now come into power is the requirement for all local authorities to create and then take to public consultation a public participation strategy. There was a report brought to this committee in September last year, which outlined an initial strategy which had the support of this committee, and it also involved how petitions would be carried out. What's happened since is we've incorporated the petitions element of that report to this committee into the Constitution, and that was reported on in the council meeting on the 19th of May. Because that needed to go into the Constitution as a change legally in May to reflect the change in law. The public participation strategy requirement is that as soon as practicable, we create a strategy and take it to public consultation. So that's why I hadn't included it in the new Constitution, because reflecting the significant change in council and the different kind of policy ambitions that the new administration may have, it was right to not incorporate that strategy change and go out to consultation on something which hadn't been created by council in this term. So the cabinet member who is responsible for public participation, so you might call it consultation, you might talk about democratic engagement, engagement writ large, is Councillor Fuchs. It sits within her portfolio, and it's a topic that I think speaking on her behalf, if I may, it's something that she's very keen on, and also Cabinet largely. And of course, we have a process now that Cabinet will wish to go through in terms of how they start to shape what the corporate plan is for the council, which ultimately will be a council decision over the next 5 years. So the intention is to start a piece of work effectively set up as a cabinet member working group, so set up by Councillor Fuchs, enabled obviously by me as the senior responsible officer, but with Abby Barton as the head of communications and engagement and marketing, to be the kind of the energy in the piece of work, if you like. And so the intention is to set up a working group, starting initially with representatives of Monmouthshire County Council, but then of course broadening very quickly, both in terms of breadth and depth, into the considerable number of participants that we have across our county. That might be non-governmental organisations, it might be third sector representatives, community groups, obviously community councils, and that will incorporate the question of area committees, which is one I know that's come up here and has come up from various other councillors as well. So because we are in the early stages of setting us up, that's another part of the reason I don't have a full report to bring in here, because we are yet to take the first step into effectively understanding what the landscape is here. But my ask of the committee, and it doesn't need an answer today, it could be a piece of work that goes away, but I think it's probably necessary and certainly appropriate to have representation from the Democratic Services Committee within the Cabinet members working group on this piece of work. So that is my ask of you, Chair, today, and the committee. How many and how you wish to do that is clearly a matter for yourselves. The intention is that the first, so this will start, and I will be able to actually bring back a better idea as to how this work is going to unfold at the next Democratic Services Committee, if required. But the intention is that the first understand kind of shaping meeting will take place probably week commencing the 11th of July is what we're looking at the moment, but I don't have a date yet, partly because I'm keen to understand what representation there will be from Democratic Services Committee. So I'm happy to go back over any of that, because I'm conscious no one's had a report and I've had to do that verbally. But that's the general thrust there is Cabinet Member Working Group. It's a considerable piece of work that we are discussing here because of quite how much this incorporates everything from the work that community councils and clusters, the work that we've seen grow up from flooding and through COVID, like the Business Resilience Forum, the way that Children's Services engages with its community and you know, the broader county, public consultations, statutory consultations. This is a considerable scope of work. So we're at the foothills of a significant mountain at the moment. So happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. I wasn't quite sure whether you were following the hands in the chat or on the screen, but I think I put my hand up in the chat. Yeah, I think, you know, public participation is obviously very important. And one of the things that I think the legislation has provided for is the idea of county councils actually providing on their website the ability for residents to sign petitions. Now, there isn't that ability at the moment. And so what it means is that, you know, if, for example, residents want to sign a petition with regard to, you know, reducing the speed limit, because that's an obvious one that's come up recently, then they have to use organisations like change.org or, you know, other types of organisations. And one of the criticisms that sometimes comes back is the fact that, you know, the people concerned who've signed the petition aren't necessarily Monmouthshire residents. So I would have thought it, and I think on change.org, you can actually, if you start a petition, you can actually ask the person who starts the petition can ask for the postcodes of the people who've put it in to check that point, which is one of the things that I suggested that was done in relation to a petition put in my area, as opposed to sort of these handwritten petitions that people do, where you've got the name and address, and you know that they're based in a certain particular area, as opposed to friends in London and so forth. So I think that it would be very useful if we had our own petition that Monmouthshire residents could use on the website, and also perhaps some way of checking if they are local residents as well, like change.org does. But I mean, it was quite difficult for the person concerned to actually go through and check with change.org, because they had to individually check on individual postcodes, and there should be some way of being able to do that on any set up Monmouthshire petitions. I know that there are petitions that are through the Senedd that people can sign up online, but I think Monmouthshire, I think one of the legislation recommendations is that that's available at Monmouthshire, and when my local area wanted to have a petition, we were asking whether or not this was ready yet, and just wondered if we could have an update on that, please. Thank you.
Do you wish to come back now, Matt, or
I'm happy either way, Chair. If you'd like me to come back, that's fine. So when we amended the Constitution, when Council voted on it in May, it included the changes to the petition scheme within the Constitution. So that's set out at 4.3. I will get you a page. So page 18 of our Constitution now sets out our petition scheme. It does allow for the submission of electronic petitions. As you said, Councillor Brown, that would often be through a change.org type organisation. The information I don't have, and because the technical guru, John Pearson, is not with us today, sadly, is whether we are capable of hosting those at the moment, but it's certainly our intention that that's the direction of travel. It sets out the limitations on who can sign a petition. So obviously it requires someone who is within Monmouthshire or affected by a decision. And one of the little changes that was made as part of the Constitution change as well was that petitions will now go to the most relevant scrutiny committee initially, where they're likely to get a little bit more kind of targeted focus, and then it will be for scrutiny to decide whether to then pass that on to an appropriate person, which will include council, which is where petitions already were already submitted. So the petition scheme has been updated because that required doing to allow e-petitions. That's been done, but it will still form part of the work that the working group will do, because it will have a very, very broad remit to consider all aspects of participation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. I think it was mentioned this Cabinet Working Group will cover ongoing public consultation, and I want to know whether there'll be the scope for that to go back and look at ongoing public consultations, because certainly in my ward in Growfield there is an ongoing process that's partially completed around Castle Meadows. During the election campaign, I found immense amounts of unhappiness amongst Growfield residents about the way that this has been conducted. They feel it's been completely inadequate and that their voices are not being heard and have not been heard. Related to this, I noticed there was a petition that came to council about Castle Meadows, a handwritten one, so it really represented a great deal of local residents. I want to know what's happened with that petition, what the process is going to be for taking that into account when we revisit this Castle Meadows consultation. I share a lot of these concerns my residents have. I think that they have not been adequately listened to, and I wonder what scope we have to revisit something that was initiated under a different administration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, Lady Matt.
I'm happy to keep taking the questions down, Chair, if you want to flow through, okay. But I'm entirely in your hands.
Okay, fine. Councillor Watts.
Thanks, Chair. It was, I guess, it was a broader one than just kind of petitions, really. So COVID is obviously, and we've covered this before, really. COVID is presented well, obviously a significant problem in communication. The distance between us, the authority, us councillors, the authority, has been noticeable when you've gone knocking on doors. You know, people. I mean, I literally came across one lady who literally hadn't been out. Her children drop off her shopping and hadn't been out. She was really surprised to see anybody that represented normality other than the postman, really. So she had me for about 10 minutes asking her to come out and vote. The issue is that there are a number of factors that we've created a distance. I came across another lady who was clearly unwell with dementia, who'd been locked in her house. And I found myself at the end of that process phoning up social services. She wasn't even on our radar. So there are a number of services that have effectively dropped off and we're failing to provide for our most vulnerable people in the community. And that leads me on then to other new people in the community. And I'm not just talking about the massive Bristolians that have moved into Chepstow, who've pushed up house prices. Oh, they're extremely welcome and obviously voting in a different way than their predecessors. So I guess my point is, for example, and I have to declare an interest because I live with someone who is Eastern European, the significant amount of identified Eastern European people that now live in our community that we have effectively ignored. Not one of them bothered to stand for council. If you talk to many of them, they're puzzled and perplexed at why they're voting. But of course, under the EU legislation, they are allowed to vote and they are allowed to be involved in the process. So, you know, we have identified who they are. What are we doing to reach out to those people to make them feel that they're understood, welcome, or do we understand them about how do they live? They go to our schools, they live in our communities, they're very economically active and hardworking. I think that, you know, we should really focus on that, but you'd expect me to say that because I get any bashing about it probably most weekends. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. The discussion is a really interesting one. Interesting to hear the points being made. I think the issue is in front of us is about participation, and that seems to me much more than surveys and consultation, and actually significantly more about engagement and getting the involvement of people, and that may be more ambitious, but I think it's extremely important. And I'd like to suggest that in that regard, that whilst there's some very good points have been made about in getting the involvement of all age groups, actually key to the future of Monmouthshire and key to the future of Monmouthshire County Council is getting the engagement of younger people for a whole suite of reasons. And there's nothing less likely to achieve that than dry consultations. The traditional work of councils is not necessarily going to be the best way to engage younger people. And yet last week's council meeting had two fantastic both decisions, recommendations being made. One in regard to the motion from Councillor Keir in regard to cleaning the River Usk, River Wye, and the other being the decision around the new through school. Both are absolutely enormous projects for the county. They have very long-term issues attached to them. And it's when you have something that's actually real that I think we've got a much greater opportunity to get people involved rather than something that may be a dry document. And I'd very much like to see the work that's being done or being proposed to being done to have a very specific stream of work in regard to how we use perhaps particular projects. And those two in the very first council would seem like two absolutely brilliant ones, given their scale and importance and impact, to engage younger people. And by younger people, there will be lots of different views about what that would mean. In this regard, I'm thinking broad ages under the age of 30. And the reason for that being it would encompass school-age children, college, university, all those student age groups, as well as young adults and young families who will have a future and have an interest in the future of the place that they live in. So it's really just to put forward the thought that by using very specific long-term major projects, we might actually have the most fantastic opportunity to get the engagement and involvement in participation, which I think would be a brilliant thing if we could achieve it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Conscious of the time, Matt, and there's no other hands up that I can see. May I ask you for your response now, and bearing in mind that you need to leave, and also we can move swiftly on to the next item that you may wish to introduce as well.
Yeah, once again, apologies about the timing, Chair. I think probably if you move on to the forward work plan, that's something that I probably don't need to contribute to.
Okay, that's fine. Right.
Do full on this. So Councillor Wright, the output of the working group, in quite specific terms, will be a strategy, a public participation strategy, be that a document, a sway, a video. I mean, quite how it's conveyed will fall out of the work that's to be done. I imagine there will be a number of other outputs that result as well, not least how the process of engaging over engagement and participation actually bleeds across to how it is the council is going to go through its engagement process in terms of setting up the corporate plan. Will it have the remit to review ongoing consultations? I think that would be very problematic. Accepting that consultation is a single part of an enormous spectrum of public participation. Consultation in and of itself doesn't have a single definition, because it will depend on a statutory requirement in some areas, or what is an ethical, moral or political requirement in others in terms of how it's done. So trying to take a working group to then exercise some sort of review over ongoing consultations is going to be incredibly knotty, just in legal terms, let alone in kind of logistical terms. However, learning from ongoing consultations and prior consultations is going to be absolutely fundamental. Castle Meadows, so that this was a petition brought in the May meeting. It's been passed over to, in fact, Councillor Birch chased up on this last week as well. So it's sat with the active travel officer who's responsible, Nick Tulp, and who works for Paul Sullivan. And I believe it's been, I'm going to go out on a limb and say discussed, or there's at least been an exchange of emails, I think, with the relevant cabinet member, who I believe is Councillor Maybe. And I know it will therefore influence an engagement, actually. I think they have a meeting lined up for the 14th of July. But I would probably just need to check those dates with the active travel officers. So yes, it has kind of filtered its way through, but I think that there had been a lack of transparency on how petitions bled through once they'd been to council previously, whereas with the new petition scheme, as it's set out in the Constitution, where it goes to scrutiny, will actually give a lot more detailed discussion on it and a lot more grip on where those petitions go. I think on the other points raised, Councillor Watt's point about the participation engagement of EU nationals, well, and non-EU nationals as well. The fact the age-related element that Councillor Neil was speaking to. I mean, I think these are the topics that we will get into some detail in when we get into the actual working group and the participation strategy work itself. Step one at the moment constitutes just Monmouthshire County Council officers at the moment, just explaining how they engage, and I have in excess of 40 people who have different stories to tell. That's before we move into the understand phase of what is going on in our communities, community councils, etc., how they want to engage, before we then even get into the actually setting up how sub-working groups and what have you might use. But I fully anticipate that specific engagement on the basis of protected characteristics, for example, is highly likely to come up, isn't it? So we've heard nationality and age raised in the points that were brought up then. But I hope that I hope that that's where the working group will be able to take this work. An example of recent engagement, just to address one point that I know will come up when we do the initial stock take, is the use of TikTok and a TikTok star that I'm afraid I'm not going to claim to know much about, but to promote voting amongst 16 and 17-year-olds in Monmouthshire. So we do have examples out there, but my word, there's so much more to be done. So I hopefully, Chair, that covers off the points that have been raised so far.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Right, moving forward, I'm assuming that we, as a committee, will want to be involved in the working group that will be chaired by Councillor Fuchs from the Cabinet. Do we have volunteers that would wish to join this group? Councillor Watts, thank you. Right, so Councillor Watts, I'm happy to.
I would also like to join that, please,
Wright
if possible.
as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Wright, okay. Sorry, and Councillor Keir, right? Okay, excellent. So we've got some names to put forward. Certainly interest amongst the committee, and hopefully we can discuss some further issues on this point.
Can I join as well, please? Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Can I join as well, Councillor Sandals?
Yes, by all means. Yes, certainly, thank you. Right, I think we're then on to the next item, which is future work programme. Yeah, we'll find it now very shortly. Discuss the development of the forward work plan, and this would purely be items that we would wish to include in future meetings without necessarily discussing them now, hopefully not discussing them now. Do we have any headings to move forward with, please? Councillor Keir. Yeah, okay, it's a historic hand, is it? Right. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a suggestion, really, that came out of the induction meetings. Within the Constitution and within codes of conduct, we do have standards of practice and treating other members with respect, and also treating officers with respect and so forth. But what's missing in our Constitution and our policies is there isn't any policies dealing with the interaction between members of the public and officers and members of the public and councillors. And I think that there does need to be, Gloucestershire has got a code on this, to ensure that, people are treated with respect and, don't harass officers or members. And I think that we really it would be advisable for us to have a policy as well. And it's something that we haven't actually looked at ever. And I do think it's something that's missing. So that would be a suggestion as an item for a future work programme.
Okay, and are we talking about behaviour of the public towards councillors, or behaviour of councillors towards public, or a mutual?
Well, I suppose in a sense it is probably both, but I'm thinking, there have been circumstances where, as I say, it's not just members that people do get very passionate about particular issues, which is quite understandable, but I can think of the circumstances of what I heard about was when a planning applicant was throwing chairs around the office, and I think our officers need to be protected from that type of thing. And also if members of the public are while councillors are being very helpful to people, if they misinterpret that it's a professional basis relationship, and you know, if people get, I mean, I'm just thinking about the NHS. I mean, they've got policies, for example, you know, if the public are threatening in any shape or form, then they have the option to refuse to treat. And I'm just thinking things of that particular nature that, you know, we need to treat the public with respect, but they also need to treat the members and the officers with respect as well. And we don't have anything to cover that particular relationship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nicola, are you happy to include this as you've got enough information then to include it on the future work programme?
Yes, Chair. Anything you bring up, I'll take it forward with the officers.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Yes, Chair. Just a reminder to put on for long-term future planning the timing of meetings in 1 year time.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you. Councillor Strong.
Yeah, very much support what Councillor Brown proposed. I wondered if it would also include a discussion on social media policy, how councillors respond to social media comments and that sort of thing. I know it's an issue which is exercising quite a few of our minds at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And are there any other contributions desired? Okay, so we'll obviously review that in terms of future meetings and what to put in to the agenda of future meetings. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to accept the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held in May, if I remember rightly. Sorry, even worse, November. Wouldn't be May, would it? Right, the November meeting, and apparently I was the only person currently on the council who was on that, and I gave my apologies on that date. So I think we can agree to those in principle and leave it at that, I think, isn't it? Is that about right? In terms, Nicola, are you able to advise us there, please?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. We'll just accept them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just formally, are we all happy to accept those meetings, those minutes of that meeting? Right, thank you. Right, lastly, we have the date of the next meeting being on the 26th of September at 2 o'clock. And I'm assuming we don't want to review the date of the timing of that meeting, but that was more of a flippant comment than anything else. So we look forward to seeing everybody on the 26th of September then at 2 p.m. Thank you all very much for your attendance and your contributions, all greatly appreciated, and looking forward to seeing you in the meantime and in the next meeting in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye now.